Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have for you the second part of my pre-move unhaul. This time is all fiction, various different reasons why I'm getting rid of these books, but actually I think the majority of ones are ones I've just decided I'm not interested in reading because I'm having a bit of a purge of my shelves and I'm trying to get rid of books that are just taking up space. What I started doing about a year ago now, maybe nine months to a year ago, was I started every couple of weeks I'd pick from the lowest rated books on my Goodreads TBR and I'd read the first chapter or even just sometimes the first couple of pages to get a feel for the style of writing and the content of the novel and whether it was going to be something that I liked or not, and a lot of these did not pass that test, so that's why they are going. I'm going to just start going through them. I'm actually going to start with ones that are omnibus editions because I'm downsizing my library essentially. I've decided just to cut my losses and unhaul these omnibus editions that are taking up space on my shelf. When I want to read the books I will buy individual copies, and actually for some of them I already have, so I'm going to start with that one. So this is a bind up of all of F. Scott Fitzgerald's novels. I've read The Great Gatsby and I have Tender as the Night in a single volume edition now, and I do really like his writing, but I find these heavy hardback omnibus editions really difficult to read. Really not a pleasant experience trying to read from a book this heavy, so I just am going to be buying them as individual books when I want to read them. Similarly, I've got a Rudyard Kipling omnibus bind up. I think there are 5 or 6 of his books in here. I've not read any Rudyard Kipling. I've got some of his books in single volumes, I don't think any of these ones actually, but I've got a couple of short story collections and I've got one other novel that he wrote, and if I like them I might go out and buy some of these other books, but again as single volume books rather than trying to read them in this hefty, horrible hardback. I like the illustration there. And then I've got 2 more omnibus editions. These are of Terry Pratchett books. So my brother, for years and years, Terry Pratchett was his favourite author, so he collected a lot of the books. You can see some more of them here on my shelves. When he first started collecting them, he was given these 2 omnibus editions, the Death Trilogy and the Witches Trilogy. So the Death Trilogy is the first 3 books about the character of Death, and the Witches Trilogy is the first 3 books about the Witches characters. The way the Discworld series works is there are lots of mini series within the massive series, so you can either read through all the books about Death, and all the books about the witches, and all the books about the City Guard, and all the books about Rincewind the Wizard, or you can start from the beginning and read them in order, like in publication order. And there is some debate about which way is better to do it. If you're familiar with the stories, as I am, I've read some of them when I was younger. My plan is I want to start from the beginning, from the first book, The Colour of Magic, and read through the series in chronological order rather than in mini-series order. The books within these volumes don't come next to each other in that reading that order, so that would be really irritating for me. They're also quite heavy. So when I get to the point in the series that I need to read these books, I'd rather buy individual copies. You can often find them in second-hand bookshops and that sort of thing quite cheaply, so I'd rather just buy them when I want to read them as individuals than keep these 2 very heavy editions that are taking up space on my shelf. Another couple of books that I'm getting rid of because I am replacing them, I suppose. I've got 3 books here by Japanese author Kazuo Ishiguro. My dad won a complete set of his novels in a Caboodle giveaway, and now that he's read them he doesn't want to reread them, so he's given them all to me, and they're all in much better condition than these because I picked all of these up secondhand, 2 of them from charity shops, and this one actually was from my 6th form library. There we go, Barton Peveril College. I've never got around to actually reading any of them. This cover also really freaks me out. I really hate this cover. So I've now got a complete set of the novels in matching editions. I do intend to start reading them soon. I really want to read Never Let Me Go. I've been meaning to read it for a long time. I've now got a set in much better condition than these ones. So these 3 are going that. So that's When We Were Orphans, A Pale View of Hills, and Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Another book that I am not keeping because of the quality of the edition that I've got, but I'm actually a bit sad about this because I really do love this book, but when I want to reread it I want to get a much nicer quality edition. So this is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I read this at the start of the year and I absolutely loved it, but as you can see my copy is really water damaged. Got it for like 50p in a charity shop, but because I love this book so much I would rather have a really nice edition. Sure, there must be some sort of collector's edition somewhere, but even if I just had a nicer quality paperback to reread it in, that would be much better than this really battered horrible copy. So because I'm having a clear out, I thought I might as well get rid of this one, and then when I want to reread it, I'll buy a nicer copy. Another book that I did enjoy when I read it, but it is quite problematic in terms of its narrative, is The Help by Catherine Stockett. So I read this 4 or 5 years ago and I did quite enjoy it, but it is very much a white saviour narrative. It's about a young white woman who writes about the stories of the black housekeepers and black servants that work in the rich people's houses in the area where she lives. I mean, I enjoyed the story when I read it, I enjoyed the film when I watched it, but it's not the sort of book that actually does justice to the people it's trying to talk about. And I believe I heard that one of the characters in this book is based on a real person who wasn't happy about her story being used. So yeah, it's quite a problematic book really, so I'm not going to reread it, don't need to keep it. I've got 2 more books that I have read that I'm not keeping. The first one is The Herring Seller's Apprentice by Elsie Tyler. I read this maybe in May, I can't really remember. It was okay for what it was, but it wasn't brilliant. It's kind of badly written Agatha Christie fanfiction that claims that it's better than any other detective fiction, kind of turns up its nose at detective fiction but then uses all the tropes. I didn't love it, it was alright, I figured out what happened about halfway through and then was kind of a bit disappointed because I prefer my detective fiction to be cleverer than I am, and this one was not. And then the book that I ranted about for a while. I ranted quite a lot about this book after I read it because I was so angry at the protagonist. The writing was not brilliant. I've read another book by Susanna Dunn which I really enjoyed, but this one just did not live up to it and just made me really angry at the end. The ending was awful. So this one is going, unsurprisingly. I've then got 4 books that I DNF'd at various points. These are a bit different to the Reader Unhaul ones because I was actually actively trying to read these, so I got a bit further into them before deciding that they really weren't for me. The first one is The Unfixed Stars by Michael Byers. I really wanted to love this book, I really wanted to. Unfortunately, it was written in 3rd person present tense, which is my least favourite. I really find that difficult in books, it has to be done really well. So like The Night Circus is as well, but that is done brilliantly, so like once you get into it you don't even notice that. This was not done well. I found it really grating, really jarring, and I managed 2 or 3 chapters and I was kind of hoping, so the first chapter is set in the present day, so it kind of made sense that that was in present tense, and I was hoping then that the bits about the past would then be in past tense, but that didn't happen. That's done really well in a book called The Magician's Lie here by Graham McAllister. So that's a dual timeline narrative where the events in the present day are written in present tense and the events in the past are written in past tense, which makes sense. So I hoped this would be the case with this one. It wasn't. I was really disappointed because it's an interesting topic. It's a book about the discovery of Pluto and it's set, the past part is like in I think like the 1920s. I was a little bit disappointed, but it just wasn't for the style of writing, didn't work for me, so I wasn't going to try and force myself to keep reading it when I really wasn't enjoying it. And then we have The Confidential Agent by Graham Greene. So I managed maybe 20-30 pages of this. Graham Greene novels, sometimes I really like them and sometimes I really don't, and it depends on the level of humour in them. So he was a very funny writer when he wanted to be, but sometimes he wasn't trying to be as funny. So this was just plain gritty, and like the main characters got beaten up twice in the first 20 pages, and I was just like, that is just not for me, which I was again, that was a shame because I really wanted to like it and I just couldn't get into it because it was just a bit too gritty for me. Then we've got The Lottery by Beth Gooby. This is a book, I actually still find this really hard to hold this book. I started reading this book and I was really enjoying it, and then I started reading it I think in March. It was quite near the start of lockdown, and I have PTSD following a car accident. I've just recently done a coping skills course and I'm hoping to start one-to-one trauma therapy soon, which will help me a lot more, but the coping skills course has really helped, so I'm not triggered as easily as I was. But when I read this book, there are a couple of quite graphic descriptions of car accidents fairly near the beginning. I mean, I only got a few chapters in and it just triggered a panic attack in me, and I couldn't carry on reading it, which is a real shame because I found the plot the concept really intriguing and I wanted to know what happened, but now it's just a book that I'm never going to be able to read. Maybe if I'd read it a couple of years ago or in a few years' time I would have really enjoyed it, but just the memories now associated with this book are not helpful to me. And then I've got The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. Again, I really wanted to love this book. I got about 120 pages into it, so maybe a third of the way through. I just couldn't get into it. I struggled with the style of writing, and I think the problem was something quite traumatic happens to one of the characters just before the point that I stopped reading, and that was a really hard thing to read, but it was particularly hard because I hadn't grown to care enough about the characters. I'm trying to find the way to phrase it. If I cared more about the characters, I would have wanted to know more about how they recovered and coped from what happened, but I just didn't. I didn't feel like, I just didn't care enough to keep reading. Sounds awful, doesn't it? I think, again, partly this was the wrong book at the wrong time. If I'd read this a couple of years ago, maybe I would have really loved it. But trying to read it, I started reading this when I was off work sick and then was trying to finish it in lockdown, and I got to a point where I was just like, I'm actively not picking up this book, I'm picking up other things instead, so that should be telling me that it's not for me. Maybe one day I'll see it in a library or in a charity shop again and I'll give it another try, but for now it's just going. Right, so then I've got 3 books that did not survive in the Read or Unhaul because I discovered that they were part of a series and not the first book in the series. What has happened a couple of times when I've done that is that I've then looked up the first book and tried to gauge whether I was interested enough to buy any other books that I didn't have to be able to read the books in order, because that is something that I kind of really like to do. And these 3 just did not make that cut. I jumped the camera and now I don't know if I've got the angle right again, so sorry if I jumped. Yeah, so these 3, these are all the second in a series, and I looked at the reviews of these books and the first books in the series. I also read the first chapter of these books, and just the writing style didn't appeal to me, and so I didn't want to have to buy another book to then feel able to read this. We have The Earth and Sky of Jacques Dorme by André Maquin. This may have actually been the 3rd book in that series. This one did intrigue me, but then I found out that it wasn't the first in the series and I didn't care enough that I wanted to buy the other ones. We've then got Lady Catherine and the Real Downton Abbey by the Countess of Carnarvon. This one, some people were saying in the reviews that you could read it independently of the first book, but I don't like doing that. And then I read the first chapter and it's not very well written. So I just thought, yeah, no, I don't want to waste my time or my money reading that series. And then we have Elizabeth, Captive Princess by Margaret Irwin. And again, this is the second in a trilogy and I did not care enough to buy the first one as well. I read the first chapter and it was just very dry. Elizabeth I was a really interesting, really exciting character, a lot of good things that you could talk about, and to have a novel of her life be so dry, like, yeah, no. Then we've just got a lot of books where I read the first chapter and didn't like them. I'm not going to talk loads about any of them, I'm just going to go through them really quickly. Well, I will say the first one is The Sixth Wife by Susanna Dunn. So she wrote The Queen's Sorrow, which I was so angry about. Because I liked another one of her books, I did want to give this a good go, so I read the first chapter, but I just did not like the narrative voice of like the central character who's narrating the story. I didn't like her from the offset, so I thought there's no point putting myself through reading it because it will probably infuriate me as much as The Queen's Sorrow did. And then the rest of them are just all ones that read the first chapter and couldn't get into them, didn't like them enough. So we've got The War in the Air by H.G. Wells, Getting Rid of Matthew by Jane Fallon, Helen Sloane's Diary by Jeff Lucas. I will just say a little bit about this one. This, I think, is trying to be the Christian Bridget Jones diary, but the person writing it is a man in his 50s trying to get inside the head of a woman in her 20s, and it just did not work. I had high hopes when I started reading it, but I just found it really annoying because it was clearly not written by a woman. We've got Pitch Perfect by Jodie Picoult. So I did unhaul quite a lot of Jodie Picoult books at the start of the year, and this one was one that I kept because it sounded most intriguing, but actually the first couple of pages did not interest me and the reviews of it were not great. I think I've just grown out of her writing style. I used to really love her, but now not so much. We've got Sartor Resartus by Thomas Carlyle. So Thomas Carlyle was quite a prolific essayist around the same time as Charles Dickens. When my brother used to live in Carlisle, we went to visit him and we went over the border into Scotland and went to visit Thomas Carlyle's birthplace, and then I saw this book shortly afterwards, so I thought, oh, I want to read what he said, but actually this I tried to get into it and it's so weird and complicated, and it just, yeah, wasn't for me. We've got Salmon Fishing in the Yemen by Paul Torday, The Savage Garden by Mark Mills, The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. This one, it was ultimately, I decided, I saw the film ages ago and I just wasn't interested enough to read the book. When They Lay Bare by Andrew Grieg, Andrew Grieg, I don't know. Lisha's Bones by Don Hosel, and Equal Music by Vikram Seth. Rebel Heiress by Fiona Mountain, The People's Queen by Venora Bennett, Sunflowers by G.C. Gedge, Diana by R.F. Delderfield, The Glovemaker by Stacia Brown, An Accidental Light by Elizabeth Diamond, Waiting for Columbus by Thomas Tremifuk, and An Officer and a Spy by Robert Harris. So the majority of these, it is because the style of writing just did not appeal to me. I think the vast majority of those I picked up secondhand in charity shops because the cover and the blurb intrigued me, but actually the reality of the writing style just did not work for me. Some of them it's because they're not particularly well written, and some of them it's because they were just written in quite a confusing manner. Some of them, if I was on the fence about them, I looked up the Goodreads reviews and I would read a high rated review, a medium rated review and a low rated review to see and try and get a feel for whose opinion I would most align with. And I find that quite helpful because sometimes a negative review will tell you things that the reviewer didn't like, but they're actually things that you do like as a reader, and vice versa. Yeah, so I read through some of the reviews and made decisions that those books probably weren't for me. One more book to talk about today is a book that, again, I got it in a charity shop quite cheap. It was one that I've heard really mixed things about. Some people on BookTube really love this book and some people really dislike it, but it's recently come out that the author is quite problematic, has been harassing quite a lot of female authors and female reviewers, and so that easily made the decision for me that it's not a book I want to read. So this is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. It was a book that I was on the fence about anyway. I saw it cheap, so I thought I'll give it a try, but hearing that he is not a very nice person makes me not want to read his books. So that one is going to. So I'm just going to count these and see how many more books we are getting rid of today. 39! That is 39 in this Unhaul. There were 40 in the last Unhaul and another 39 in this one. I probably won't get quite that high again in my next Unhaul, but we shall see. As I mentioned in the previous Unhaul video, I'm filming these two today because there were quite a lot of books. I didn't want it to be a really massively long video, so I decided to break it down into non-fiction and fiction. If you haven't seen that first part, I can link that for you so you can go and check that out. There will be another Unhaul just before I move, so once I've packed up all the books that I want to store and the ones that I'm taking away with me, there may be some left over that I don't want to keep, or maybe a few that I've read in the interim that I decided not to keep. So there might be a very small Unhaul again that I'll film at the start of September just before I move. I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to edit and upload these. If there are any books that you think I really should not be unhauling and you're quite angry that I'm unhauling them, do let me know. And if they haven't gone to the charity shop by the time that tell me that I should be reading them, I may be able to rescue them, but it probably won't happen because it's taking me so long to edit videos at the moment. Let me know what you thought of any of these books. Have a chat to me down in the comments about how you decide whether to keep books or not. Have you ever done the try a chapter thing? Does that work for you? Have you ever had any regrets about that? You can also follow me on my social media. I'm on Goodreads, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. I'm at Kerry Louise Reads on Twitter and Instagram, and Kerry on Goodreads, but all the links for that will be in the description box below for you. You can also like this video if you like it and subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also click the notification bell if you'd like to be told every time I upload. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!